speaking of suing, so here we have another topic here related to that, and in this case, with the suing of Disney from Miss Johansson, from the Black Widow debacle. Now they're doing the attacking here, suing the heirs of Marvel creators, or heirs of Marvel creators here, for copyright termination. And it makes sense since they've invested a lot of money, and they continue to invest a lot in the Disney, the Marvel universe here, by continuing producing more films, TV series in their streaming services and so forth. But the question is, do they have the right, or does the heir, or even the creators who created those IPs have the right to block the copyright termination here? Anyway, according to Koimoy.com, so Disney has sued the heirs of Marvel comic creators to keep the rights of Avengers characters from copyright termination, which I think it's a great strategy on their part. But I think there's a debate here as to, because if you think about it, the Marvel company who commissioned those comics way back in decades past, like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, that they were only tasked to create comics to sell for the consumer. So obviously, whatever the ideas that they got, the company would benefit from it. But I think there was no uh, agreement as to what type of application those contents will be utilized. No one knew at the time that it could be used for filmmaking, streaming, or even in the gaming industry here. So obviously, credit should be given to those creators here. It won't be fair if Marvel were leveraging that, and now that that IP is so popular and all of those ideas came from those creators, shouldn't they get what they call this, credit where credit is due? And shouldn't they get royalty similar to how music artists, when they created something, even though the music company publish it or sell it or market it, the music still is uh, from the artist creation, so to speak. And I think I'm on the side of the creators here, since if there's no protection on the creators here, then for future references, why would creators create new characters here? Or even better, and you could just imagine if Stanley were not to create the known character, which is Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, Avengers, on and on and on. You could just imagine here, and without them, even Jack Kirby is not being recognized here. Even when they were still alive, you always see in the movies that the Mr. Stanley had an arrangement that he'll be paid for how many million? I think a million when the MCU film started, for the rest of his life. But predating that popularity, where was the credit there, right? And even Jack Kirby was trying to fight for his recognition of he was part of a duo who created those popular characters that we have here. Anyway, so as you can see here, Disney now is suing the heirs. So obviously, sad to say that Mr. Stanley has passed away, and Mr. Jack Kirby. So the heirs, who owns the rights now for their parents or for their dad's IPs, is trying to stop them from gaining those full rights here. Anyway, it was stated that the complaints from Disney stating that the heirs of the late, comic book geniuses, Steve Ditko, I was thinking of it. Anyway, and Gene Colan, for the different characters that they have popularized in mainstream culture. So they included that in the lawsuit that they should get full rights to those characters and story elements that have formed the base of. Yeah, but you benefited from their IP, from their intellectual property, and it won't be nice if, let's say, someone were to, don't give credit to, let's say, Mr. Walt Disney for creating Mickey Mouse and so forth. It won't work that way, right? But anyway, so the lawsuit followed after Liber and Ditko sent termination notice to reclaim the rights for Marvel characters such as Spider-Man here. And obviously, these notices mean that the creators and the heir share the publisher's swap, which I think is reasonable here. I'm not saying that they should take full credit for the films or future films, but every time they use the IPs of characters here, or even the storylines that they've created in the past, then they should benefit from it, right? As long as you use their names, their likeness, and their storylines and so forth. Just like, I think it makes sense for for many of the music or even novelists for who created the stories here, and had to create that in their mind. Imagine when Stanley was telling how he came up with those characters at the time. So looking for, it takes a lot of creative juices here to be able to create one of the best characters, or popular characters in the world, in superheroes history here. And but the studio argues that Marvel has sole creative control. Obviously, they purchase it from Marvel Studios here, so that Disney would have the rights to keep on, publishing more films, continuing it with, with the Marvel Phase 1, 2, 3, and how many phase they plan to do. But again, it stands to reason, if you do not reward those people who created those IPs, or give them a portion of the profits, then there will be no more creative incentive for people in the future to create more better stories, more characters. And as you can see here, one would think that when you think of Superman, it's a male character here, and then just to create another super person, they just create a female segment. But there's no basis from that, until Supergirl came out, right? So just creating a separate gender for the same characteristics of that hero, if there's no origin, as to no precedent based on comics, which is what many of those films are trying to base their story. So obviously going to offend, or piss off a lot of Marvel comic aficionados. Even if it doesn't make sense what's been told in the story, and then if it's told a different way and presented in a different way, take a look at the DCEU, how they terribly presented the Justice League here, with Josh Whedon release here. But anyway, so obviously the case does involves an invalid attempt by means of termination notices here. Whether the courts decide in favor for the studio here, or uh, for the creators here, hopefully it would listen to the importance of the creativity in this. Imagine here that in everything that you come up with, even though the company has the right to it, but at the end of the day, you should be recognized and be paid handsomely here. And obviously, unless there was an agreement at that time, but there wasn't. So that, I think that was the main issue here. So I think moving forward, maybe you need to create, I think how NDA clauses that Amazon, Apple, or other tech companies are doing it in their companies nowadays, if you want to avoid this problem. But we'll see how it pans out.